Hey, it's Susan. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have just the cutest quilt for you. The client and I decided to go part overall, part custom. See how delightful all those fabrics are. They're so yummy, bright and vivid. And the whole tone of the quilt suggests something whimsical, not literal. So, as usual, I started stabilizing. I ditch quilted, I think in clear thread, between the lines of the pacing, between the bars of the strips and between the applique. And then once I had that done, I started going after the pieced parts of the quilt to get that over and done with. So I put in some Omni polyester thread. It's a light green. It's going to blend. Green is a neutral, so it's not going to show up a whole lot here. I think any thread color would have a hard time showing up in the first place because of all the deep saturated color and all the color changes in the fabric. You see how the leaves and the flowers and the prints are dreamy and hazy and stylized. So that's kind of the tone the quilting is taking as well. So this is an overall meander, all freehand, not using any kind of a pattern. And I took off using a combination of things. There are feathery flowers, some other types of flowers, some leafy branches, medium-sized clusters of circles, a few swirls, and a whole bunch of echo. Echo helps to get from one place to another, and it's a great filler, so that was good. So this is what you just make it up as you go along. When I was first learning how to do this, I found it helpful to sketch some things out on paper and like make myself a cheat sheet of sorts that I could refer to. Because you get something done and then you think, okay, so what do I do next? And it's nice to have that sort of thing to jog your memory. And the other delightful thing that happens here is while you're quilting along, ideas normally just pop into my head. Hey, wouldn't it be cool to do this here? And what if you did that a little bit differently? And so it just evolves organically. The thread is going to show up in some places and it's just going to totally disappear in others. And that's fine. In retrospect, you know, once I got the whole thing done, and isn't it funny how that's when you know how this quilt would have been better had I quilted it this different way. That kind of thing happens after you've got it quilted. Not so much before. Maybe before, but not always. So this quilting is very busy, and so is the fabric, so are the prints, so are the colors. So all that pretty work shows up in some places, but not in others. And I kind of thought what might have been better would be to do some lines in the piecing. On the diagonal, for example, you know, different combinations of lines, maybe. And I shared this information with the client and she disagreed. She loved the way the quilting softened the whole thing up. So there's an argument for going with a busy meander. There's a lot of different things you could do in here. Some large, sweeping, feathery branches would have looked really good. I thought in the very beginning that this might have been a place to try, doing some partial pantograph quilting. And I just thought that would create more problems than it would solve anything. In the beginning of planning the quilting, what usually happens to me is I have no ideas at all, and I think I'm never going to have any ideas. And then in a very short amount of time, I have way too many, and then I can't pick just one. So to circumvent that kind of indecision, circular thinking, I think it's best to go with your first instinct. And when I was talking this over with the client, a combination overall design was the first thing that popped into my head. So that's what happened here. Here on the lighter fabrics, maybe you can see the quilting a little bit better. And this part goes pretty quickly. It doesn't take a lot of time to cover quite a bit of ground here. The client had a lot of these strips left over after she pieced the top, so she included some in the backing of this quilt as well. And there will be photos of that at the very end of this video, so keep an eye out for that. The batting in this quilt, I suggested to my client that we go with Quilters Dream wool, just because I knew I wanted the loft in here to help with the quilting. It's a puffy bat, but lightweight. So why was that the right choice here? Well, I think you can already see the dimension that it's giving the quilting here in the piecing part. And that'll become even more important when we get to the background. And probably even more so when we get to the applique. This quilt is not huge. It's a throw. It will be used, or at least that's the current plan. So you want that to be drapey and dreamy and lightweight and not too hot. And I know a lot of people think, well, wool batting is going to be hot. Yeah, but it's not like a wool coat. It's a whole different type of thing. It's see-through and airy and light. And I sleep under it all the time. I don't find it any warmer than any other bat. In fact, I think if you used a dense cotton bat, that would be much warmer. Wool batting makes your quilting look gorgeous. It makes your motifs pop right up, and that's what we want. I don't want to do all that work to no purpose. So I stabilized the quilt with clear thread and then changed thread to this green. So I want to quilt all the elements I can with one thread type and color before changing to something else. So for this meant the order of which things would be quilted were we'll quilt the piecing and then we'll get right to this applique. You can see the edges of the applique have been ditch quilted, so those are nice and stable. The colors change on the applique, and I thought I would be having a different thread color with each one, and that's not what happened. I auditioned this green on all the fabrics, and I liked them in a lot of places. So I used the green, and then I switched to another Omni thread called Cookie Dough. I love that thread color name. I think it's great. It's a soft, buttery looking color. It'll blend in with all sorts of things. So the color palette here went from green to yellow, and then to white when we got to the background. Because there's a lot of color already on this quilt. It didn't really need much more. There wouldn't have been much point. Okay, so the applique is fused applique, and it's layer upon layer. And this is part of the reason why I wanted a lightweight bat, because I don't want to add any thickness to this. It's already thick enough. So I don't want to do a ton of quilting on these flower petals, because that's not going to work. I mean, it'll be a super stiff quilt if I do that. So I decided to quilt some curls in here. This was the only idea I had at the time. And I like to pay attention to that. If I've got one idea and that's the only thing that shows up, that to me is a signal that it's the right way to go. I quilt intuitively. So I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. Each petal turned out to be a little bit different. You know, what's going to work in the one I just quilted and what's going to work in this one, you know, those are a little bit of some different shapes happening here at the outset. So I want a design that's going to make sense used in a small size that is also going to look really good, you know, when I get to these big open areas and I can make the design a little bit bigger. Thematically, I think it kind of makes sense. In retrospect, what else would have been good? I could have outlined, or in this case, inlined, just, you know, do some echo on the inside of each petal, which I think would have been fine, but maybe a little boring. And maybe not enough quilting. At least not just one. I could have done some feathers. I thought about that. That would layer in some more thread, and I didn't want that. So I just stuck with the curls. I could have done some leafy, spiky quilting. I didn't think about that till just right now. You can see the layers right now. See, this light blue floral is kind of see-through, and that dark blue patch underneath it shows right through. So some parts of it are already stiff to begin with. I chose to stop and start with each petal. I could have made the whole thing as continuous as possible by, you know, backtracking along the same quilting lines to get back down to the center, but I didn't want to layer on too much thread. This is looking really pretty. I think that green thread, I don't know, I might have switched to blue, but I don't think so. It looked good on these blues. It looked good on the purples that are coming up. The thread contrast, the contrast in color was slight. I mean, any thread color would have had a hard time keeping up with the saturated color in these fabrics. And then also you want something that's going to look good on the dark fabrics, as well as the lighter ones. Unless you just want to change thread color all day long. So here's one with the, oh, see, isn't that pretty? I love the way that turned out. That looks really good. And there's the cookie dough. So I quilted one great big curl in the middle of that flower because I didn't want to compress it at all. And then look at the little background quilting on the white part. If I hadn't quilted that, that would have created a weak spot in the quilt. It needs the stiffness of the quilting to keep up with the stiffness in the layered applique petals. All right, so now I've switched thread color over to the white or an off-white. I'm using So Fine by Superior. So I decided, you know, this quilt is so ultra simple. It's just piecing and then it's some applique. I thought there needed to be some kind of a buffer between the two. So I added these scallops. I thought that was just a really great idea, and I've echoed them once before going in and adding the background quilting. And so my thinking here looking at this is they look like they're the wrong scale. They look huge and empty and kind of wrong. So we'll talk about my fix for that here in just a moment. So what I'm doing in the background, you know, what I thought about all along, again, it's the first idea that popped into my head. Let's quilt the background, and there's a lot of it, with a big freehand flower that mimics the applique. And I guess big is a relative term. This is the flower I do all the time, so we're not breaking any new ground here. I was not going all out on this quilt. It's not a show quilt, but I did want to do it justice. So I think the flower idea was sound. The larger you make the flower, the less background quilting it's going to need, you know, to fill in. And I think it does need some to fill in. I think if you'd left the background quilting out, that would have been strange. Because let's look at the negative spaces happening there already. It needs more. I could have made that flower, you know, much bigger, but I don't think that would have added much to the quilt. So put in the flower, give it some little creases, echo it. And the background fill, I decided, and I don't know where this idea came from. Let's just do some circles. I don't know where the whole circle thing came from, but the circles relate to the scallops. They're both circular, and I decided not to make them teeny tiny. You know, I'm keeping the scale medium mostly, depending on the shape. Because I don't love making circles all day long. I think it's boring, and I think it looks like all you know how to do is make circles, and it's not very creative. So I'm adding the background quilting if I'm already there, you know, if it's convenient, but keeping in mind what's going to happen in the rest of these negative spaces. So I'm going to use one of my favorite little tricks and do partials. I'm going to add half a flower here. So it looks like it's behind the great big applique flower. This is going to cut down on the amount of space I've got to do circles in. It'll be a lot more visually interesting, and that's what I'm after for sure. This is not the fastest thing in the world. You know, your background quilting can really slow you down. And I could have done all kinds of complex things that would have taken a lot more thought, time, and effort. But this still took a little bit of time. For the people who say, oh, well, there's not that much background in there, I challenge you to quilt your own background and then tell me if you think there isn't a lot of it. There most definitely is a lot of it. Those are some big spaces, and they will need something. This space in particular is a little bit larger, so it's not going to get half a flower. It'll get more like, I don't know, 3/4 or something. But this is coming along nicely. I like what I'm seeing. It looks pretty much like I had pictured it in my mind's eye at the outset. There were quite a few stops and starts here. I like to minimize those as much as possible, and it is possible to minimize some. You can always backtrack, quilt over what you've done, going in and around the circles. The more you grind in those circles, the more they pop out, so that's a lot of fun. And that's going to be a judgment call. There is such a thing as too much backtracking. And if I am here at this point and I want to go, to the opposite end of this piece of fabric, that's a lot of traveling to do. I don't mind stopping and starting. So the more this area gets filled in, the happier I become, because the background quilting gives you so much payoff. And I can see, is this working or is it not? Is it looking really good? Is this how I imagined it was going to be? Do I have the scale right? And if I can answer yes to those questions, then this gives you like rocket fuel to keep on going. Because background quilting can really create a whole lot of work for you. So it's great to have a rewarding feeling of payoff and think, oh, look how good it's making those flowers look. Look how delightful this is going to turn out to be. I imagine how pleased the client will be with the quilting. And being my own worst critic, if it makes me happy, then I know I've done something well. All right, so that's just about filled in. And this is where I began to see, oh, look how those scallops look so empty. I think they're too big, and I've done too much work now to go change the size of those things. So what kind of a fix am I going to make here, if anything? Also, one word about those scallops. This quilt does not take itself too seriously. So I just hauled off and started freehanding those scallops. So they're not perfect. They're not all the same size. They don't work out perfectly around the corners. I tried to get them to do that. Had I wanted perfection, I could have done the math. And then I thought, well, so what if they're not perfect? They still look pretty darn great. And so I reject the perfectionist label that people like to hang on me. Perfectionist and custom are two extremely different things. One does not necessarily have anything to do with the other. When you freehand, just right off the bat, the perfect label has gone straight out the window. So my question is, what difference does it make if there are slight imperfections here and there? Is it not still delightful? Is it not still getting the job done? Is it going for competition in a major international show? This one is not. I'm not trying to shortchange my client. That's not what's happening here. But I'm also not putting myself through impossible standards for no great purpose. To go back and rip out all kinds of quilting just because it's not perfect, I think is kind of crazy. So my fix was to retrace my steps and add a circle at the crest of that scallop. I thought it would be a slight change. I thought it would be thematically in keeping with the background quilting, and it is. And now I think that scallop is really cluttered. So, but that's what we're doing. I mean, I'm committed here. So it was an easy fix to make. It went pretty quickly. I think it's unique. The client really liked it a lot. She didn't think it was overkill at this point. That's the only person I have to impress here. It fits in with our whimsical approach. It added only a little tiny bit more work. I think it looks really good. So to expedite matters, I quilted the scallop and then added the circle, and now I'm adding the echo, and then I can get back to my background quilting. As for alternatives, gosh, that's a limitless list of possibilities. This background would be another great place to add some lines. It just kind of depends on what kind of a look you want. I think the mistake that could get made is in choosing a background fill that would look too much like the overall quilting and the piecing. If all the quilting looks the same, then there's no contrast and there's no excitement. That would not be a good look. So just as long as they're really different, I think you'll end up with something pleasing. If they're the same scale, even, let's say they're different designs, but they're the same size, that would not be good. That'll be boring. And this is such an easy flower to make. I like that it relates to the appliqué flower. I think that is how you get a harmonious design scheme happening here. I didn't put in a whole lot of leaves, which I normally do when I add flowers. I wanted it to be really simple. But by the time I got to the end, I was adding some more leaves and swirls and things, just because I was getting bored with all those circles. Now, an alternative to putting those scallops in there, it might have been nice to echo that piecing, right? Add a line, a straight line around it, of like a ½ inch away from it, and then maybe add 2 or 3 more lines. I could have put some little sashing or border pattern right there to break up the background quilting and the piecing. That could have been interesting. This is a really simple quilt. There's not a whole lot happening here. So that to me was a pointer to do something with the quilting that's not just so thoroughly plain and expedient. So you've got lots of design choices. on a quilt like this. There are just limitless possibilities with the quilting, which is what I find so intriguing about it. I loved the quilting from the very beginning. I think some really good quilting can make your quilt come to life. What also might have been good, and this didn't occur to me till just this moment, would be a couple lines of echo around the applique petals. That would have been good. That would have added some separation and some visual interest. Echo is just so useful. Echo is your friend. It'll solve all kinds of problems, and it'll feature whatever you're echoing around. It's really useful. So this is coming along. There's a cluster of leaves coming right up here, as opposed to adding another flower. Why not? And here's our payoff. What do you think of the background quilting now? I'm pretty pleased with it myself. And what do we think of the scallops up against the pieced body of the quilt? I think they're cute. Okay, here's a look at the back. You can't really see the quilting too much, which is fine. Oh, look, in some places there you can. So that's delightful. And here's another look at a different part. Thanks so much for watching.